Right. Good evening, everybody, or should I say good day from wherever you're listening to us from. And I thank everybody, first of all, for tuning in. We thank our lovely guests that we have today. We have beautiful faces. I'm going to let them introduce themselves to us. I think we're going to start with Vi. She's smiling and she's already unmuted, ready for us. Can you please introduce yourself and your spiritual background for the listeners and the viewers?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vi Ned Jackman, and I am a health coach and a mental health coach also. And I, I am affiliated with Impact Church. I've been a born again believer for 30 years now.
Thank you so much, Vi, and welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're going to go with Miss Maria so that we let the ladies go first. I hope Pastor Anthony doesn't mind. Miss Maria, do you want to introduce yourself and also as you introduce yourself, give us a bit about your spiritual background?
Hi, my name is Maria Franco, and I am the religious education coordinator for the parish that I work at, Sacred Heart in St. Eulalia. Um, my spiritual background is I am a catechetical leader in the church. I love working with children. That is, I think, part of my calling. And my experience with mental health is I myself, have had challenges with it and with anxiety, but I have a brother who suffers from schizophrenia. So I don't have any, official or technical background in mental health. I am just a survivor and thriver and, um, you know, warrior of mental health.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for being vulnerable already and telling us about what you're going through and your brother as well. And I love that you used warrior, that you are a warrior. That's really great. I love that word. Pastor Anthony, would you care to introduce yourself to the viewers and also your spiritual background?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody, or good day. I'm Pastor Anthony at Impact Church out of Maywood, Illinois, and my spiritual background. I grew up uh, as a Catholic, lost my faith many years ago, and about 14 years ago came back to Christ because of my wife, and now God has a sense of humor. Has called me to become a pastor. So he can use anybody with any skills, and he is. I'm a walking, proven example of that. I am also a mental health coach. I got certified for that, and a first responder for mental health, also for the youth, which is awesome. So that's a little
Thank
about.
you so much, Pastor Anthony. We're happy to have you, and I love your story. God is indeed sometimes he can be a bit tricky and has his own ways. I also want Nev to introduce herself. I love her so dearly. I would love for you to introduce yourself to the viewers and also your spiritual background for us.
Yeah, sure. So hi everybody. My name is Neph Lesperance. I am actually working with CSPL as a um, the digital outreach coordinator, and I should say for those who don't know what CSPL is the Coalition for Spiritual and Public Leadership, and that's how I've met Maria and Rosette. Um, and so, as far as spiritual background, I grew up in a Protestant tradition. My parents, they grew up being Baptist, and then so we were Baptist for a little bit, and then we ended up at a non-denominational church. So I guess I would say a little bit more non-denominational. Um, and so yeah, I'm excited to be here today. I know our second question is going to be about our experiences with mental health, so I'll answer that since we kind of already started, and then we can have V also share hers. My background with mental health is for a few years I kind of struggled with depression. Um, and I think especially being in the church background, it was very easy for people to be like, well, you just have to like pray it away, which praying is helpful, but I also grew to realize like I needed some more than that. So that's kind of where I started, is like trying to figure out how do I care for myself and deal with my symptoms when they come up, while also being true to my faith. So that's kind of my background of mental health.
Yeah. And I think like you bring something up that is very important that I think I've also struggled with it as a Christian is knowing how to balance that, how to still keep your faith and still know that hey, beyond your faith and your prayer, you can still seek professional help for what you're going through. And I don't know if we want to have Miss Vi kind of talk, if you can talk to us about an experience you've had with mental health, maybe personal or of somebody that you know, as we try to dive deeper in this topic of mental health in the church.
Okay, sure. Hi. So I had a personal experience, but the strange thing about it is that I didn't realize it was a mental health issue until like now that I did the program and now that I'm hearing about this mental health. But at the point when all these things was happening to me, I just didn't know what was happening. You know, I just knew I was struggling and didn't understand why I was struggling in life. You know, and but during that time, because of my faith in Christ, I held on to my spiritual beliefs and values, and that is what kept me because it was a very dark period in my life. And I would not like anyone that I know, not even a pet, I would like to go through what I've been through because it was very horrible. And there were many times, I had thoughts of, it was like voices speaking to me, which was real, to take myself out of this, but I never had a plan as how to do it or what should I do. And so I just continued living, every day. And then after a while, I rely on my faith because, I knew there is power in prayer. So I started to pray because I said, if God answers prayer, he could answer this one. So I started to pray and ask him to take me out. So I would go to bed in the night and hoping that he would take me out. So when I get up in the morning, I would not be there. And then, bravo, every morning I would wake up still. And so I thank God, that that was one prayer that he did not answer because it was really a horrible time, and I mean to depart and leave my kids, it would have been horrible. So I'm happy that God did not answer that prayer, and also that I did not have a plan, even though I had these voices speaking to me to tell me take myself out. I never had a plan as to how to do it.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I think it's very important when you bring that up because so many people who actually experience mental health illnesses or challenges don't even know what it is that they're going through. Some are either in denial, others just don't know that even mental health, something like mental health or mental illnesses exist. So it makes sense in a way that you were going through something, you knew something was wrong, but you didn't know what that was. And so since you didn't know what the problem was, it was kind of hard or challenging for you to figure out how to seek help or assistance. And as we're talking about the experiences, I don't know if it's possible for you to just make it a bit clear. When you say you were asking God to take you out, is it that, or you were thinking of ways to take yourself out? Is it that you were having suicidal thoughts and you were thinking, how can I end my life? I don't want to be in this world anymore. Is that what you mean by you were thinking of taking yourself out and praying that God would take you out?
Yes, actually, yes. I sort of reached a point where I thought, life was not worth living, and I would hear these conversations. These are conversations that was spoken to me, by unseen forces or unseen being, that I'm no good and I'm making other people's life, worthless and miserable. So it's easier if I take myself out of it, So I agreed, I thought, yes, and I would sit there crying all in tears, and agreeing with whatever, was saying these things to me. And so I didn't see the purpose of living. I didn't see it. Because on top of that, I had other challenges. So it's everything was compounded all at the same time. So it was just horrible, and I thought, life was unfair, life wasn't worth living. So that is why I was saying, it's easier if I just take myself out of this, if I depart. But I didn't have a plan, So I thought the best thing is to pray and ask God to help me with that, to help to take me out. So I was hoping that when I go to sleep, God would do some work a miracle and I would not wake up, I would be on the other side. But it never happened.
I'm actually grateful that it didn't happen. I really believe that as we're sharing this, so many people are just being touched to realize that they're not alone in whatever it is that they're going through, that there's somebody else as well going through that or who has gone through that, and that there is a road to recovery. So I'm really happy that you are here alive with us, and I think your children are too. Miss Maria, did you want to share with us maybe your experiences? I know you've already shared a bit on anxiety, and I know you also have personal experience secondhand in the family. Do you want to share a bit with us on that?
Yes, absolutely. My personal experience with mental health has always um, revolved around anxiety and the panic attacks. Recently, I've been reading more about anxiety, not necessarily considered a only a mental illness, but more of an emotional illness. Whichever way it is something that is very hard for not only your loved ones but people in general to understand, and especially in the church. One of the reasons why I got into this work is ever since I started working with the church, I started to come across people that had these same challenges as me. And, they were constantly told by family and clergy and other leaders that it was a matter of faith, it was a matter of prayer, it was a matter of, having a spirit of courage and not a spirit like not a spirit of fear. And that really at first I believed that. And I also felt that, something in my faith must be off. I was a cradle Catholic and I've been Catholic my whole life. And, I didn't understand my faith as deeply as I do now that I've been in formation. But, it was a very, very black or white message. Um, at the same time, my brother was struggling with schizophrenia. He was a couple years older than me, and he wasn't understanding why he was going through all that. And being told that he didn't have enough faith either. And watching my brother literally surround himself with um, pictures and statues and rosaries, and constantly begging God to relieve him, and then being told you're not doing enough, you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough faith, really hit me in my core. And I realized the church needs to really change the way that they are handling people with this type of affliction, because it's not a matter of faith. I believe that the brain is an organ like any other organ, and can, sometimes cross its wires. And no matter what you do, how much you pray, unless you seek the medical help that, the earth provides, that God provides in allowing people to become doctors and therapists and psychologists. And he gave us all these tools to take advantage of so that we can be healed. And so that is the message that I want to bring today, because Jesus gives us a spirit of courage, but not a spirit of courage of not to have fear, but he gives us a spirit of to continue to fight for our health, and a spirit of continuing to hang in there, just like V was saying. The courage to confront these horrible afflictions that unless you are living in it, you don't understand how hard it is and how horrible it can be. But I also understand that those closest to the problem are the closest to the solution. And so the fact that once you become a survivor and a thriver of mental health, you are the solution, you are the hope, you are the vision. And so that's why I got into this work. Because if I can tell the next girl next to me that, hey, that panic attack you're having, it's okay. You're going to be okay. There's help. Get help out there. God gave us a spirit of courage to look for help. And there is help and there's hope. And so that is my experience with it. I'm not going to say that, I'm free of it. I still struggle with it many times, but, my faith is my rock, because I know that God is with me through this affliction, and he will be with me till the end. And I want to be that beacon of hope for others as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That was very powerful. Um, I think that the thing that stuck out for me was how you were talking about being told that your faith is not strong enough. Do more, do more, do more. And it pains me just to hear the way you're describing your brother having to pray more and surround himself with all these things, saying, God, how much more should I do? to be worthy of having this taken away from me. And it feels like more of a merited faith. And I think when Jesus came on earth, he came to rid us of that burden of saying, you merit my love. It's a love that is given freely to everyone. We don't have to do anything to earn it. So it really breaks my heart, but I love that it brings such an attention to what is really happening as well. And hopefully, as we go down in our conversation, we can be able to come up as well with solutions on the way forward. But before we move to the next question, we still have Pastor Anthony, who can maybe speak a bit more to us as well, seeing that you're a pastor. How does that work for you? I don't know if you've had personal experiences with mental health, but I know as well that in your work, you've come across people struggling with mental illnesses. Can you please speak a bit more on that?
Absolutely. I also grew up in the Catholic Church, and but at a young age, I walked away from my faith. And growing up, my name's Anthony, right? I was named after my father, but they called him Tony, and my teachers would call me Anthony, but my friends and family would call me Spiff. It was a nickname that was given to me when I was 4. So I had 3 personalities growing up, and I didn't know who myself. I didn't know who my real self was. And so growing up, in school, I'd be this good kid, if you want to call it that. And on the street, I was known as Spiff, and this was a crazy kid. And at home, I did what mom and dad said. And so growing up in Chicago and with gangs and drugs around me and stuff like that, I started walking down a path at an early age, like I said, walking down a path that was not straight and narrow. And so my faith was never, it was there when I was young, but as I hit teenage years, my thought process and the way I looked at myself and what others looked at me like, brought a lot of grief in my life. It brought a lot of anxiety, depressions, things that I didn't even realize, that I would turn to drugs, I would turn to smoking, I would turn to alcohol, right? At a very young age now. And so as something happened, I lost a sister when I was 20 on my birthday. And that's really when my train of thought went south. And I said, if there's a God, and you took this wonderful girl out of my life, I don't want to know you. And I said I was going to become the devil's right hand man. And that's when my train of thought truly went 180, a whole nother direction. And my thoughts were all about me, myself, and I, which brought me farther into depression, farther into anxiety, farther into Vice said having thoughts in your head. So being on drugs and alcohol, I always had thoughts in my head talking to me, and I didn't know who was real and who wasn't. And I remember a time that I truly thought I didn't want to die. I thought I was gonna die because of just what I was doing that night in my life. And and I wasn't a believer, but I remember crying out to the Lord saying, give me one more night and I'll stop. It was a lie, but I said, give me one more night, get me through the night. And he heard that prayer. And it took 2.5 years later for that prayer to come and get answered. But in that 2.5 years, he started putting people, places, and things in my life to start changing now that I look back. And Maria, I'm so sorry about the church doing things like that, saying you don't have enough faith, because I went from no faith to having all kinds of faith in my life. But it was a struggle. So it was a struggle finding who I am. Who am I in Christ? Not in what the world says, but who am I in Christ and what Christ says I am. And then it's a struggle daily to fight the thoughts of the devil out of my head because of so many years of doing stupid things in my life, right? So and it never got to the point that I needed medications or anything like that. But there are people in this world that, even in the Bible, Maria, when you were talking, girl, there's so many different parables and stories. I as you were talking, that were just flying through my head, going, man, this guy didn't have faith and Jesus saved him. And this guy, we never know who he's going to save and how it's going to happen. And that's the beauty of God, because his grace and mercy is for everybody. And some people get healed and some don't, and that's a story in itself, because the people that still keep their faith and don't get healed, man, they got a bigger testimony than any of us, because their faith is still there and they still know who they are in Christ, and they still know that they're loved in Christ, you know. And so it's taken me to this day. I still struggle with anxiety and depression at times. It's just now I know how to deal with it differently, and I can realize that I'm doing it, and it helps to have a great support system. I know we got more questions about what you've seen in the church and stuff like that, and what can the church do better, and I'll go into that after in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I've struggled. I'm helping people. I was texting somebody yesterday that's struggling mentally, or with their health issues, mental health issues right now. And you know, it's a daily fight. And if you're not willing to get up, like you said, Maria, and fight daily and be a warrior, and to look at it and say, Lord, give me my daily strength today, give me my daily bread today, you're gonna lose that fight every day of the week. But it's with that faith, knowing that I can do all things through Christ, right? Because it gives me strength, and knowing that there are people out there to help me get through this. There are doctors, there are uh, coaches out there. There are all kinds of people that want to help. It's finding those people, and that was one of my prayers. So
Mhm. Yeah, thank you so much. That is very deep. There's a lot that you said, and like a lot is coming in my head. But I love how you kind of highlight for us something that is very important to say, that you kind of had three personalities, and it was very important, very challenging, so to say, to merge all three. Because when you're here, you're somebody else, and when you're there, you're somebody else, and when you're here, you're somebody else. And so it's like you're living so many lives all at once that even for yourself, you don't know who you are. And if it starts at such a young age, when you're supposed to be growing and finding out who you are and your identity, but you have all these three, I can just imagine the challenge and the struggle you had, not knowing where you stood in society and as you try to find yourself. Um, I think as well that the other part that you talk about that is very important for me as well was when you talk about the support system. I think most of you guys highlighted that you still struggle right now, but now you have coping mechanisms, you have things that you put in place that you know can help you be able to fight this battle. So I want us to go to the next question, which
Um,
I think we're.
before we go to the next question,
Mhm.
Maria had a thought, I think, that you wanted to add to this.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that. Sorry, Maria. You want to add?
Yeah, I kind of lost a little bit what I was thinking there earlier when Anthony was speaking. But in reference to the way the church handled, and the way the not necessarily the church, but the leaders in the church addressed my brother and myself as we were, on our journey through mental illness and mental health. I feel like that is why it is so important that all denominations, all beliefs, all churches that practice a faith come together and really unite, build a bridge for mental health. When the mental health first aid trainings, when I learned about them, it was through the church and through very dedicated parishioners. That we had a lady that was homeless and kept coming to the church, and at first we were very, trying to help her, but then she became very persistent and kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. And at some point you don't know what to do, so you start to hide, you pretend you're not there. And something inside me told me this is not the way to handle this. And a parishioner told us about mental health first aid, and we all took that, and then we learned a lot about what she was going through and what she was struggling with, and were able to get her help, and able to help ourselves see too how we can help. So I think that even though things are still very, very far away from where they should be, I think that as leaders in the church, as members of the community, we can help to build that gap, bridge that gap, and bring mental health awareness into the churches and reduce the stigma by talking about it, constantly talking about it, working to make it a requirement for priests to get this training, for lay leaders to get this training as part of their formation, because it is when the people in charge and the people that are seen as leaders take this on that we're going to start to see the real change, because they're the ones that talk to the people that, you know, go see the priest or go talk to the priest because you're going through something. And if the priest is trained and is aware of what's happening and is accepting of this illness as a real illness, the person going to him will be that much better for it. So that's kind of what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was nodding throughout saying, I totally agree with what you said. And you kind of got into some of our questions. You answered some of our questions already, but I wanted to kind of give anybody else an opportunity if you have anything else to share concerning of how you've seen the church address these mental health issues. I don't know if Neph had anything else to add, or Vi, before we move on to the next section. I think we kind of touched a bit more, but I don't know if anyone else wants to add.
So with my situation, when I look at it, is that even though I was going through my issues, no one in the church knew. And no one in the church was prepared to help me in any way because they did not know. And even though they had known, they would not be able to help me because at that time, you know, it's like a stigma, and it's just as how Maria said that they were saying that it's like she's not doing enough. So it would have been the same response, you know, whereby they feel, well, you're not strong enough, you know, or maybe you have committed a sin, you know, like with the blind man, you know, and they ask who sinned, you know, who was the person responsible. So generally, when something go wrong in the church, we look at it as sin, you know, who sinned, whose fault it is. So what I'm looking at also is that we are the church. And if in spite of whether the leaders are trained or anything, we as individuals have to reach out because people would come to us outside of the church building. What are we going to do? I remember one night my daughter was here with me and it was around 11 p.m. and she got a phone call and I heard her saying, I'm not going to take this call. I don't know who it is. So I said, who is it? I gave me the phone. And it was, she said, Mommy, I don't know who this is. And it was a young man on the phone. So I took the phone and I started answering the phone and I spoke to him. And I say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on with you? And he started speaking to me. He said, well, I called this number because I wanted somebody to talk to because so much things was going on, and I think, well, I could make it throughout the night tonight. So he was on his last, and he was just reaching out. So he just dialed my daughter, and she said she don't know who it is. So I spoke with him, and I realized what was going on, that he was in a dark place, and he just wanted some encouragement. So I sat there maybe about a whole hour on the phone and was talking because he was miles away. I'm here in Chicago, and he was in Trinidad. And he had no idea that my daughter was here in the US at the time. So I said to him, I said, okay, I'm in the US, and this is not my daughter you're speaking to, it's her mom. And he was so happy and thankful that I took that time to listen to him because nobody knew at that point. He may not, if he had not spoken to someone, maybe that would have been his last, because those are the things that he was expressing to me. So I'm saying also, there was a time I had a conversation with my pastor, being a student here, and he was asking me about school and stuff. And something happened, and we talk about knowledge is power, and he said, no, applied knowledge. So I am saying apply knowledge. So everything that we learn and the leaders learn, unless we apply it, we would not be able to help anyone because we are the church. So we have to be prepared to help, to extend ourselves outwards and help people, whether it's on our journey to work, because generally I usually meet up some, I would say some unique cases, and I know it's not by chance, but it's divine appointment. And usually I would lend a helping hand in whatever way, because these are people with issues and they are crying out for help. So I'm just saying, for us, to be the church actually, because the church is not a building, we are the church. So we need to rise up and do, and because we have first-hand experience, it put us in a better position whereby we can reach out and help others.
Yes, thank you so much. I love that you keep saying we are the church, and I think it brings a bit more highlights on what we've been talking a bit with Neph on our podcast, and how the church is a bit closed and not so welcoming, and how can we be welcoming to people from outside. And when you say that we are the church, that gives the impersonation, or in the imagery of you extending it and going beyond the walls, the four walls of the church, and actually going out and saying, hey, I can actually apply what I've been learning, or I can apply the love. We can always use so much more love. I don't know if Neff, you want to add anything onto what was just said.
Yeah, I was gonna add something, but I don't know if Anthony wanted to, because I saw your hand was up. Okay, you want me to? All right, I got it. Well, for me and how the church has addressed this, so I'm thinking about like, so with my background in social work at Loyola, part of what I was interested in learning is like, how can I use what I'm learning in social work and kind of bring it into the church space and help make the church, like, in a sense, like a healthier space for people regardless of their background. um and so one of the things that I realized in my research is that, a lot of the times, like, pastors, they'll get trained in like preaching and all these different things, but in terms of like mental health awareness, just understanding how to talk about specifically that issue, there's a lot of holes. And so that's why a lot of us have said here, like, every time we talk to our pastor, and they do what they can with their theological training in some ways, but when it comes to like really understanding what mental health is, and pouring out, or pointing people into the right resources, I think that's where they struggle, because that wasn't part of their training. And so I know from me, like, some of my experiences, it's been mixed. Like, there's some people that I've talked to within the church that were like, yeah, we're in therapy, like, and we're like proud of it. But then there's some people, even my family included, where we talk about therapy, they're like, oh, you just need to pray more, oh, you just need to read your Bible more. And it's not saying that because I need extra help in mental health, or I'm seeing a therapist, or I'm on medication, or whatever it is, that I'm not doing those things. But especially if there's something going on chemically, sometimes you need that extra help. And it's the same thing, like, if somebody has like, a health issue, like a heart issue or diabetes or whatever it is, you're not going to tell them like, oh, pray more, read your Bible more. You're going to send them to the hospital and have them, take the necessary precautions or medications or whatever they need to get better. And so I think for me, as I started working more through my faith and learning more about social work and learning more about resources that are available, I had to learn what it looks like to be comfortable to talk about faith and talk about my mental health journey. And yes, I was fortunate that in some ways I never had to, like, um do medication or anything. But even then, like, that doesn't, whether you have to be on medication or not, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that you might need a little bit of extra help, and that's okay. So I think, a lot of the things that we don't do well as a church is we add so much stigma to it. And I think, V put it a really good way in saying, like, we make it a personal failing of that person and say, oh, you've sinned, you did something wrong, there's something wrong with you. And it's like, no, like, God created us to be who we are perfectly. And just because our bodies fail and we have issues, it doesn't mean like we did something wrong per se. It's just, unfortunately, the result of like this world, and the fact that it's fallen and it's broken. And so I think, in good cases, I have seen, some church members who are like, hey, you know, yes, I'll pray with you, but also let me connect you to this resource that I've heard about, or let me take you to this, therapist, or even I've had friends that are like, hey, I'm seeing this really good therapist, maybe this, or so in in good cases I've seen that happen, and that's something that I'm encouraged by and I want to see more of. But I would really love to see us like not do so much of like that blaming. And I do think sometimes that comes from a place of like, I don't really know how to sit with this and I don't really know what to do with this. So instead of like, saying that and maybe trying to find another way to help you, I'm just going to blame you. And so, I think if we're honest with ourselves and say, hey, maybe if I'm honest, I can say, I don't know what to do about this, but I'm happy to work with you to find out. Or I don't know who to talk to, but let's Google this together. Like, if we can have those honest conversations, I think that will do so much more for the people that are, struggling with this stuff, instead of us just like pushing them away. So, that's kind of like some of my initial thoughts on that. But Anthony, now if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Thank you. You ladies are awesome. Um, and the reason I say that is because talking with guys about this, they wouldn't be so open. You ladies are very vulnerable talking about this. I tell people I wear my emotions on my sleeves, and my life's kind of an open book, and my wife likes that at times and not at times. But there's in the Bible, there's a story about a man named Legion, and this guy had 1,000 spirits inside of him speaking to him, lying to him, and making him cut himself. So the Bible actually talks about mental health issues, and I think we sometimes bypass that and look over that story, but it's true, it's in there. And in the early church, there was a stigma 30, 40, 50 years ago, because if you had some kind of illness and you talked about it, something's wrong with your child. Shh, don't tell anybody. Keep it a secret. I remember people in my house telling my mom stuff, and they'd be like, "Don't say that to the neighborhood or anything." Why? We can't help you if we don't talk about it. And that stigma, what is still there, because it's been there so long, and you weren't able to talk about it, and you weren't supposed to take medications, and you weren't supposed to try to get help for it, that it's just kind of a black space in the church at a time. And now, though, because it's so prevalent out there that people are talking about it, I'm seeing more pastors, and a lot of churches are not equipped, like Maria said, that this should be a part. And when I went to school, I went to a 3-year school, right? And I got all my books right next to me right now. Not one had a mental health class in it. Well, not one had how do you coach somebody, even with sicknesses, because it's not about faith. You go to a doctor to go get healthy. When Legion met Jesus, he went to the ultimate doctor and got saved, right? And Jesus healed him, but he went to a doctor. He met Jesus, right? He met somebody that could help him, and then he had a community that was able to help him go further. And that's, I think, where the church is struggling right now with that, because they don't know what to do. And now it's so prevalent, like I said, that the churches are starting to talk about it. It is a little more prevalent, especially then COVID happened, and so many people are struggling with it, and they're realizing, man, it's not just with COVID, but my whole life I've been like this, and COVID just was an extreme on top of it. It was that little pebble that made the avalanche go down. And so more churches are listening now, and they are getting people equipped. Is it going to take time? Absolutely. It's going to take 5-10 years before this is a common thing, I think, inside churches, because a lot of churches are afraid to touch the matter. If we can't heal you with prayer, then I can't, go to a psychologist or go to a doctor for this. That's the wrong way to look at it. I have in my back pocket resources up the wazoo. So when I pray with somebody and they don't get healed, hey, you want to talk to this person? Hey, do you want to talk to this organization? Hey, I've got this. Because if we empower people, that can truly make an impact on their lives. But if we can't get equipped, like Vi said, if I learn all this knowledge but never apply it in my life and into other people's lives, it's pointless to have the knowledge. What's the point of having it? We'll just keep doing a normal thing every day of our lives and keep struggling. But if you have the knowledge, now we have to apply it to our lives, and we have to let people help us do that. And sometimes it's not a pastor. Sometimes it's not a lay person. It has, so there's different, and that's the craziness about mental health. Every person is different in how they deal with it, and every situation is unique. And you have to be able to listen and understand and assess, and then walk them through those stages on how to get the help. But again, if you're not equipped and you're not willing to learn and you're not willing to talk about it, it's never gonna end.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think we kind of answering so many questions all at once. But I think that when you're talking about it like that, in my head, I'm just thinking that you're talking about it might take some time, it might take some years. I think we're kind of conservative as well sometimes as Christians, and can kind of put ourselves in a little box and say we're not going to get out of this. But if we have to talk about maybe why, I don't know if somebody still has any doubt after listening to all of this. I don't know if one person maybe wants to quickly answer that for us. Why do you think such topics are important in the church? For me, I from just hearing all of you guys and from experience as well, I really feel like um, it helps us to truly live, because I think mental health is a medical condition, just like any other medical condition. And when it comes to mental health, though, people don't treat it like a medical condition. Some people are seen as demon possessed, others are seen as mad people or crazy. We've heard people being told that a child can't have mental illness, or somebody your race can't have mental illness. That's for white people, so to say. So we have so many things that go around when it comes to it, and nobody ever just says, hey, it's a medical condition. And the way Neph said, if you're having a heart problem, you're going to go to the doctor and say, hey, this is what's wrong with my heart. So if you're having a medical condition and it has to do with your brain and it has to do with your system and all of that, why not go seek for that medical counsel or medical assistance? So I think if we start looking at it as well like that, it might help us a bit. For me, the other thing I wanted to highlight, even that I think sometimes I get a bit challenged with, would be that it's kind of a hard to balance both, because sometimes you feel like, okay, maybe I'm kind of telling God that I don't really believe that he's that strong and that he can heal, because you'll read the Bible and you say, oh, God can do it, there's nothing impossible with God. And I think sometimes we stick on that and say there's nothing impossible with God, he can do everything. So God, you can make depression go away, or you can make, I don't know, anxiety go away, you can make PTSD go away. And I think that's where, maybe in my opinion, where pastors and preachers and priests are kind of having the challenge, um, still being able to tell people that God is divine, he's great, he's powerful, he's capable, and still telling that same person after praying with them and saying, hey, okay, we've prayed, now seek this help, without really diluting or making a person feel like God is not as great as he's made out to be. And just hearing from all of you, I feel like it's kind of coming in my head, that thing where you say that God is the one who gave us this intelligence. God is the one who allowed us to discover the science that we have, to discover solutions to different problems and illnesses that come anyways. Why not take advantage of it? And I think somebody said that earlier on. So I don't know if somebody still wants to answer that for us. Why is this topic important in the church? I'll quickly give us a minute before we answer our last question. I don't know if any.
So, what I'm thinking concerning that, Jesus is our greatest example, and as a leader, and every condition need a different solution. So I think this is why mental health would be important in the church, because some things can be done with prayer, some things can be done with fasting, some things can be done with counseling, some things can be done with a simple hug, and others, right, would need referral, like medical, to like medical institution. Because I remember with my own experience, when I was going through my low period. And there was one day I was home and I was crying so much because I was depressed. I don't know what was happening. And I was just crying all the time. And then I had a women's meeting from church to attend in the evening. And I went to the women's meeting, and the person who was the greeter at the door, she gave me one big, warm, tight hug. It's not because she knew something was going on with me. That was how she greeted everyone. And I would never forget. That hug was like a place of solace. I felt comforted. I felt wanted. I felt appreciated. And at that point, all my problems disappeared. So at that point, that's all I needed, that hug and some love. So there are different things that would be needed for different conditions. So this is why I think it's important to discuss mental health in the church.
Yeah, and I was gonna add, I think, a lot of the times we think mental health only looks like a certain way, like, oh, this person is gonna be disheveled and they're gonna do this and this and that. But it's like you never know who can have it. You never, everybody that has it looks different. For me, for example, I was like high functioning depression, like had high functioning depression. So like on this, as people saw me, I'm like running around, running committees, doing great in school, doing sports, all this stuff. And then secretly, like, I was struggling with anxiety and depression in high school. So, like, for me, for a while, because I was high functioning, I didn't realize it was an issue. I didn't realize I was having a problem. But then it took me like having to actually, it was like, I think Robin Williams passed away, and so with him passing away, and and people talking about how he struggled with mental health, I saw myself in him in the sense of like I was a person that was functioning pretty well. I was making people laugh all the time. Nobody would ever be able to tell like there was something wrong with me, that I was feeling all these different things. And at the end of the day, like I was, struggling with mental health just like he was. And so I think, a lot of the times we have these horrible misconceptions or ideas of what mental illness looks like. And so because of that, we're like, oh, okay, then because it doesn't look like this, that means we don't have it here in this church. And it's like, no, like you miss out on really helping people because you're in your mind, you're like, it has to look like this or it doesn't exist. And most people don't look like what we think mental health is going to look like. And so I think that's one of the reasons where it's like we have to talk about it because so many people are struggling with it, and sometimes even some of them don't even know that they're struggling with it. And so until we know how to recognize the signs and we know how to really talk about it openly, we can't do anything. And I even think with like I think about, and this I really am passionate about helping like staff as well. That's part of like the research that I wanted to do in school. And so one of the things I think when we talk about this too is like how much like for pastors, we never think about how pastors and priests, they have to carry a lot. They have to carry a huge load. And so for me, even in the importance of talking in mental health, it's also thinking about how are we doing when we're taking care of our leaders, so even our pastors, because I think it's so easy to be like, oh, the pastor has it, the priest has it, the other members of the clergies have it, but we don't think about like all that weight that it takes to run an organization, how easy it could be for them to also fall to depression and anxiety and wanting to keep up and wanting to do all this stuff. And I think we end up seeing that sometimes when years down the line, you have like a pastor or somebody that like falls, but really heavy, like really big because they were, holding on to all this stuff behind the scenes. And then that showed up in some way that we're like, oh no, this isn't acceptable. But again, if we can recognize, hey, actually, our pastor is struggling with burnout, or hey, our pastor hasn't taken a break in a while. Maybe we should see how, like, if we can notice that stuff, not just with our pastors, but our other leaders, our members, like, I think that can, do so much for our church and especially to make it a healthier space in general for everybody to be in. And so I think when, even in talking about with mental health in the church and why we need to talk about it, I think we need to realize it's a group effort. mental health and having the conversations around mental health, it can't just be like, oh, only this person with mental health needs to talk about it and champion it. It needs to be all of us that are taking responsibility for it. Because again, we don't know, like maybe, for example, um, you can be fine for like 20 years of your life, you lose your job and then like a lot of symptoms show up. Or actually I used to work in inpatient care, and like there was a young lady that I worked with her family. She spent 28 years perfectly fine. One day she just started having symptoms of schizophrenia. And so I think even with that, we never know when any of this stuff can, also hit us, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, whatever, PTSD. We never know when it's going to hit us. So having the tools and being prepared ahead of time to really talk about these things and come alongside other people with it, I think is so important. And it's not enough to just be like, oh well, when it finally hits my family member, now I'm gonna care about this. If we can be proactive ahead of time, I really think it will do a world of difference for our church in a lot of many ways. So that's why I really do think it's so important for us to be talking about this ahead of time.
Yes, there's a lot to take from what you said. That the thing that is coming up, if I should, in my head, is for us to be kinder to each other, because you never know who's going through what. And the way you said that, it doesn't. I guess it doesn't see your reach, and so I'm not gonna hit you. Your reach, so you're not gonna get PTSD. It doesn't judge. There's no race with mental health and mental illnesses. It doesn't see race. It doesn't see sex. It doesn't see gender. It doesn't see, I don't know, culture. It doesn't see any of that. Denominations and all of that. It can happen to anyone, anytime, anywhere. And just for you to say that it's a group effort, for all of us to be aware of this, to be more involved willingly, and say that, hey, I'm gonna love more. I'm going, even if it's not happening in my house. Maybe like Vi said, that hug she got, that was something that comforted her. So maybe my kindness today might be helping somebody without me even knowing. So we are indirectly responsible for each other without even knowing it, actually. So going to our last question, I think we've actually kind of shared a bit on what the church can do, from talking about training and taking care of our leaders as well. I don't know if somebody can help us with, how can the church be more effective about addressing mental health. That's going to be our last question for tonight. So I think we're going to start with Miss Maria. She's been a bit quiet. Miss Maria, how do you think the church can be more effective with addressing mental health?
Well, I've been listening, and I realize that I've learned a lot, not only from listening, speaking on a topic, but listening to all the stories here, and learning, that we are all much more similar than we are different. I think that that's something that's very important to understand. The other thing, that how can the church be more effective? Well, I think Anthony really hit on the point that the church really needs to continue to open the doors, but also um, open up the way that the leaders in the church are formed. The way that, like he said, when he went through a 3-year program, never was mental health touched as a subject. I think one of the first things that needs to happen is that should become part of the formation of the leaders in the church, the pastors, the sisters, anybody else who is going into leadership. I am myself in a leadership program for 3 years. I don't know if they're going to touch on this subject, but I really hope they do. Because one thing I've learned is from my brother and many other people struggling, when everything else is stripped from you, when you lose your job, you lose your family because of this illness, your faith is what stays. My brother could have been as manic, as paranoid as he possibly could have been, but he never lost his faith. He never lost the desire to have that faith. Um, and so that's something that's, very critical, that they understand that more than anything else, when someone is going through a mental health struggle, their faith comes to the forefront of what they are going through. I think secondly is engaging in conversations like this, but also bringing trainings into and bringing support groups and mental health trainings and other types, forming alliances and collaborations with organizations working towards mental health, reaching out to the organizations that are working with the youth in the community, because I think a lot of these mental health issues and mental health crises rear their heads in our preteens and adolescent years, and can do it later in life as well. But many cases can be um, addressed and talked about early on. So I think forming alliances with school districts and different youth groups and youth camps in the area, to bring these mental health services into the church, um, are very important, and offering spiritual direction for people going through this. And when you're going through this, one of the first things you think about is calling your pastor or your mentor in the church, and for them to know, you know, and have an idea of what you're talking about. And we're not asking them to be experts, because that's why we have the psychiatrists and the therapists, but to be knowledgeable and to be able to offer resources. But more than anything, to be compassionate, and to understand that it's not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of, you know, um, having faith. It's a matter of, finding the right medical help with the right resources and the right support. And then one of the things that I really, had a struggle with was take or don't take medication. And I mean, the look on people's face when I wanted to take medication or when I talked about medication, oh, no, 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 that's horrible. Don't put that poison in your body. But you know what? That's a very personal decision. And if I had diabetes or heart disease, nobody would tell me not to take my insulin. Nobody would tell me not to take my blood thinner. Everybody will tell me, hey, you need this, take it. And so to be discouraged from taking medication, um, it's not anybody's place except a psychiatrist who's trained and knowledgeable about that to advise or not advise. But in the end, it's a personal decision. And so, you know, never shaming people for making the decision, because for many, medication is that lifeline. Without that medication, they wouldn't be here today anymore. So it's very important to have all these things come together. And it's organizations like CSPL and Impact Ministries and all the other ministries that are not only taking the initiative and taking the steps, but are at the forefront of this work. That is how change is going to come about, because it is from the community, by the community. I've always believed that the community has the answers for the problems in its own community. And so the churches that are in our community and many of the other communities that are struggling, you know, we have to be that change. No one else is going to do it. So that is why I'm here today, and that's why I believe that this is so important.
Thank you so much, Miss Maria. I saw Pastor Anthony clapping and he even has his hands raised. So we'll go next to you then.
Maria, you said almost everything. You mentioned compassion, uh, compassion, having knowledge, um, being able to have skill to get what we're learning to get it to people, and as being people not just of faith, but having people come to us and tell us this is happening. Our integrity needs to be intact doing this. Now, when somebody speaks to us, they're speaking us because they trust us. They care enough to come to you, that our integrity needs to be there. And you also said the body of life, meaning that there are people there to help support you in this. And the question was, how can the church get better at this? I'm on a Zoom call every month for the last year on Thursdays with hundreds of pastors around the state of Illinois. And in this Zoom call, halfway through the year, we started talking about mental health, which never, ever came up in a conversation. So has there been struggles with it? And if it would never came to light if the virus didn't come out, because pastors, like you said, Nev, pastors struggle with this. We're human and we're all flawed, every single one of us. And like you said, was that this has no race, creed, color, doesn't, just like the virus, doesn't know who you are, doesn't care who you are, but we all struggle with it. I'm seeing now, like I said, that's why I said a 5, 10, 15, 20-year timeline on this, because pastors are right now realizing this is something that everybody's struggling with. That if they don't do something, their people are gonna struggle and they're gonna get worse, and then they may even leave the church. Like right now, in the we started classes called "Food for Your Soul," "Food for Your Mind," and food for your spirit. And the food for your soul, Vi is a certain, she's a health coach. So we talked about how you have to have a healthy, eating habits and all these things. And then last month we did food for the mind, talking directly on mental health issues, how to overcome them, how to look for them, how to give people resources. And then next month we're going to be working on finances, and then food for your spirit too, because I am I have a financial background, so I enjoy helping people with that. But how it all works together for your spirit, because when one thing's out of whack, everything goes out of whack at times, and that's just how nature kind of happens to us, right? One little something in your life happens, and then they all go out of whack. So but I truly believe that because people are talking about this more and it's on people's conversations, that the church leaders and pastors and priests are listening to this and realizing if we don't get on ball with this, we're gonna miss it, and our people are gonna struggle even worse. And I pray all the time. As we were doing this, I was just thinking, man, the school that I did come out of doesn't have a class like that. So why shouldn't I just ask them if they want one and help them put together a class now, so we can train the next generation, right? It is about equipping and teaching now. So thank you for making this conversation pop that in my head to say, hey, let me talk to them and see if they want to have a class for that, because it truly needs to be out there, you know. And so yeah, I mean, I think in the years to come, more pastors, more leaders are going to be speaking on this subject. Actually, this Sunday, I'm going to be speaking on this subject about worry and anxiety. So it's funny that we're talking about this tonight, and because I am preaching on this on Sunday. So
So I know it's about time that we may be wrapping up, but I just wanted to add something to all what was said. What was said is already beautiful, and I am not touching on that. So I remember, as a child, they said three things are important: is reading, writing, and arithmetic. Now, arithmetic wasn't that was my pet peeve. And when I left high school, I did not have that. It's later on I went back to school as an adult, and then I was able to pass my maths. But one thing that stood out for me is sets, when we were doing sets with all these different circles. And I see this mental health issue and the whole church and all of this as sets, right? It's all these different institutions. So we have the family, the family is an institution, the church, the hospital, the school, all these are different institutions. So I want to make mention of the family, which is most important, because with the family, right, the family, when we have a strong family, we have a strong church, we have a strong community, and so on. And so I believe now the family should be included in this, because most of the problems happen to a person we belong to a family. And the sad thing is, most of the time, our family is not aware of what is happening to us, or the family is not equipped to help. So, in all whatever is putting together, I think it should include the families. Like, even though when Pastor put his programs together for church, we have to have whereby we sort of educate families and make them be aware, so that, because if a family member has a issue, they would be able to speak to you first. Because I remember, I'm speaking from experience here, that my daughter was going through anxiety problems, and she went through it on her own. And it's afterwards, because we have this relationship, we would sit and talk and share things, and she started to share. And I was sad in the sense that when she was going through that, she did not come to me for help, or she did not mention it. But after she had been through it, then she was able to speak to me. And so this is why I'm saying, as families, we have to include the families. We can't just say the church only, because the family is the church, and the family come to church, and the family come with a problem and go back with a problem. As Neph was saying, there's no specific look. So we came dressed up and all of that, but we still have our problems. So the family has to be included to sort of be aware of it and sort of be the first, right? The first responders, so that we could respond to our families. So it would be less problem, and leaving everything for the church or for the mental institution or for whoever else out there. So if we are trained to help our families, we start. So if we help our families, and then eventually what would happen, it would spread. So healthy people, we would have more healthy people in the community and in the world, because we're starting to help one at home, two at home, and then we help all at home, and then by extension be able to go on helping others. So this is my contribution. The family is important also and must be included.
Thank you so much for that, Vi. I don't know, Neph, do you have anything else to say before we go to closing?
I was just gonna add, like, the best way forward is for us to go through it and then do it with humility. Because I think a lot of the times we have a hard time, just as humans, but as a church, like moving forward and doing better, because we're so caught up in, oh, I have to, do it the right way, I have to figure it out on my own. We let our egos get involved. But I think a lot of this work just requires us to come together humbly, and like I said, if you don't know what to do, that's totally fine. There's a lot of resources, like I know we talked about CSPL and impact and all these different things, like, you know there's resources out there. We just have to not be afraid to go to those resources and learn what we need to learn, so that we can help each other. So I think that's all I would add, is just come with this with humility, and work together, and don't be afraid to admit if you need some help. And then if someone does admit that they need help, like, don't shame them, and do what you can to guide them to those resources. So I think that's all for that I would add. I think everybody else's answers were perfect. Like, spot on.
Thank you so much. I loved everybody's response. I loved our conversation today. It was very in depth, and I think we can actually go on and on just because there's been a lot. But I think what we've had right now has helped us to kind of gather a bit of, make a little summary for everybody on the subject of mental health and the church. What can we do as the body of Christ as well to help people suffering with mental illnesses? So I'd like to thank Miss Maria, Vi, Pastor Anthony, Neph, for being part of this panel, and everybody as well who's listening. Thank you so much for participating. And just to let you know that if you are going through anything, that you are not alone. Reach out to somebody. There is always people out there who love you, who are willing to see you prosper, who are willing to see you safe and flourishing. And that if you have the breath of life in you, then there's still hope, and there's still so much more that you can accomplish. So there's always a road to recovery. This is not the end. Whatever it is that you're going through, it is not the end. There's a road to recovery. We will be sure to we'll make sure that we also put in resources and helplines that you can call or text if you need any assistance in any way. And if you're not going through anything, remember to be kind to those around you, and be kind to anybody in general, because you don't know what anyone is going through. So thank you so much from us. It is good night or good day wherever you are and whatever time you're listening to us. Bye.